Welcome to the Mrs. Silva Reading and Writing Show. It's a bird. It's a plane. No! It's Super Silva! She saves kittens from trees, children from danger, and makes sure no chocolate is ever poisonous.
We'll be discussing Protagonist and Antagonist. It's the great superhero fight of our day. Are you ready to be amazed?
What is a protagonist?
A protagonist is a leading or main character in your book. Why do I know this? I'm so glad you asked. I am a protagonist. I'm a good guy, and I have the leading role in this show. I'm a key character, superhero, and I make the most important decisions. That is why I am a protagonist.
Hello. We interrupt this regularly scheduled broadcast for breaking news. We're going live to Mrs. Silva's kitchen.
We are live from Mrs. Silva's kitchen, and we have a thief. Who is stealing cookies from the cookie jar?
Who, me? Couldn't be.
Thank you, ma'am. Who did steal the cookies? Or, better yet, who could be the antagonist? I believe it's the cookie thief. What exactly is an antagonist?
I'm glad you asked. An antagonist is the character that is the main foe or adversary of the main character, the antagonist. The antagonist is, well, bluntly put, is the villain or bad guy. But I don't like to think of myself as the bad guy. I mean, who doesn't love cookies?
Well, there you have it, folks. Straight from the horse's, or dare I say, villain's mouth. Back to Super Silva.
The last we'll hear from this cookie thief. I mean, who doesn't love cookies? Now, what do you think about protagonist and antagonist? I'm sure your very own leading character in your story, your school story, Mrs. Silva, has a mission for you superheroes.
You just heard about protagonist and antagonist from Super Silva and our villain. And we know that a protagonist is the hero of the story. They're usually the main character. They're the ones doing all of the good. They're the ones you're rooting for. Whereas the antagonist in the story is the villain. They're usually the bad guy, the one that's causing all the trouble and the conflict, whether you're watching a movie or reading a book. The antagonist is just the one you're like, ugh. But you need both for any kind of book or movie. If you just have a protagonist, if you just have a hero and they're not doing anything, not saving anyone from bad guys, it's kind of a boring movie. And if you just have an antagonist where they're just doing bad things but nobody's stopping them, you get kind of frustrated with it. So you need a protagonist and an antagonist whenever you're doing any kind of writing, or even whenever you're reading a book or watching a movie, you're always going to see the protagonist and an antagonist. So we're going to take a look at that today. Who do you think is the protagonist and the antagonist? Who do you think's the hero and who do you think's the villain? So grab a piece of paper and label it 1 through 8. Beside each number, I want you to write if you think it's a protagonist or an antagonist. Number 1, Woody from Toy Story. Protagonist or antagonist? Number 2, Stinky Pete, the miner from Toy Story. Number 2, is he protagonist or antagonist? Beauty and the Beast, number 3, are they protagonists or antagonists? Gaston, number 4, is he a protagonist or an antagonist? The Avengers, number 5, and there are quite a few of those, but are they all protagonists or antagonists? Number 6, Thanos, are they protagonists or are they antagonists? Number 7, Batman, is he a protagonist or an antagonist? And number 8, the Joker, is he a protagonist or an antagonist? So let's see if you got them right. Woody from Toy Story for sure is a protagonist. He is a good guy, even though he makes mistakes and he has flaws. Just like in any book or movie, a character is going to have flaws and make mistakes, but they can still be the hero of the story. Whereas Stinky Pete over here, he was the antagonist because he was always causing trouble. As nice as he seemed in the beginning, he was causing trouble. Beauty and the Beast. The Beast didn't really start out as a great protagonist, but he eventually grew to be one by the end of the movie. And of course, Belle throughout the whole movie was a protagonist. Whereas the antagonist in Beauty and the Beast was Gaston. He was the one causing the trouble. He was the villain in the story. We had many protagonists in the Avengers. There are quite a few of them there. You can see, again, they were the heroes. They had flaws and they made mistakes, but they were still the ones trying to do good and trying to do their best to do good. Whereas their antagonist in the story was Thanos, because he was not trying to do any good. He was doing everything bad and causing conflict in the story. And finally, Batman and Joker. Batman was the protagonist, or is the protagonist. He is the one saving the day, coming in, stopping the Joker or the Riddler. Whereas the antagonist, the Joker, is the one that's causing trouble and has all of these schemes to get people in trouble. So it's important that we know what the protagonist and what the antagonists are in a story. Whether it's a book or a movie, it's important that you can see who's good, who's bad, and you can also see that not just through their words, but through their faces. Look at most of our villains. Most of their villains have like a conniving laugh or a smirk on their face, or they look very angry, whereas most of our heroes look ready to save the day. They're on their way. They look good. They look like they are going to do good. So the difference between protagonists and antagonists are not only through their words, but also through their pictures as well. Let's take a look at one more thing for protagonists and antagonists up here. So when we look at conflict, we always see a protagonist and an antagonist. A protagonist is the main character in the story. It's often the hero, like we said, whereas the antagonist is the character who works against the main character. The antagonist is often the villain or the enemy. And just like we saw Batman and the Riddler, or Dorothy from The Wizard of Oz and the Wicked Witch. The villains, the Riddler and the Wicked Witch, whereas Batman and Dorothy are our heroes in the story. So when we look at our protagonists, antagonists, again, we want to use facial expressions, we want to use words, we want to use their actions to tell if they are a protagonist or an antagonist. So considering the Lemonade Wars, and we are reading all the way to chapter 8 this week, who would you consider to be the protagonist and the antagonist in the Lemonade War? And do you think it could change by the end of the book? You may think one person is the antagonist right now, but by the end of the book, do you think that could change? And the same with the protagonist. Do you think that they could change and become a villain by the end of the book? Or you think that they're really good, but by the end of the book, you're like, oh, wait, they're not very good. So again, I think the protagonist and antagonist may surprise you a little bit. The antagonist will surprise you a lot, I feel like, by the end of this book, but we'll see. But I want to hear your opinions. Who would you consider to be the protagonist and the antagonist in the Lemonade War? So again, protagonist and antagonist. Protagonists are our heroes. Antagonists are our villains. A great way to remember that is pro, like protagonist. Yay! Pro is like a happier word. They're doing good, whereas antagonist typically doesn't sound as happy and joyful. So those are going to be our villains.
Thank you for joining us on the Mrs. Silva Reading and Writing Show. We'll see you next time.